Hello and welcome to eXp Executive Masterclass. I'm Bryon Ellington. This masterclass series is dedicated for you. This is a series of eXp leaders coming on, sharing their passions about real estate. All of us having been agents, we understand what it takes to succeed in this business, and we want to help you by sharing our passions. Now, today's session, I'll be your conductor instructor for eXp Executive Masterclass, presenting and training like a pro. Now, really quickly, before we get started, in the chat, I'd love to know, what's your opinion? What's our role as trainers? Do we give the fish? Do we teach fishing? Or is it something else? What is that? More on that in just a little bit. Before we jump in, a little bit about me. Hi, Bryon Ellington, Chief Learning Officer for eXp Realty. I've been in this business for 20 plus years, was raised by an agent myself. I spent 15 years at Keller Williams. I was their Chief Learning Officer, Chief Products Officer, Chief Operating Officer for their international franchises. I went to Realty, now called Anywhere, ran training and coaching for all of their brands, and now have the pleasure and distinction of being with eXp, helping our amazing agents build their business. One of the biggest achievements in my lifetime was as a Chief Learning Officer. I'm in the Training Magazine Hall of Fame. I'm very pleased to be in that Hall of Fame, very limited crowd, and the team that helped me get there was an amazing team. So today, I wanted to share with you about my lifelong passion, which is training and presenting. I myself am a lifelong learner. I assume if you're in this session, it's because you are as well. And thank you for being that. In my opinion, you cannot have enough people who care and want to help others in this world. So thank you. All right, so quick temperature check. In the chat, what did you come here to learn? What is it that you're after in coming to this session about how to train and present like a pro? So let me take you through what we're going to talk about. And as we do, I want to switch gears on you throughout this. I'm going to come at you from the role of a trainer, training on training. But I'm also going to take a step back every once in a while and point things out to you along the way. And this is one of the first things that you'll notice. I begin with the benefits of the session. I don't begin with learning objectives because people don't care about those. What they care about is, what am I going to walk away from this training being able to be, do, or have, as Stephen Covey would say. So for us here, these are the 5 things we're going to tackle together. We're going to talk about boosting our confidence, getting rid of anxiety, and getting up there and being our best self. We're going to talk about clear communication, how you can engage and share ideas effectively. We're going to talk about our professional presence. What do we want people to feel like as we're up there presenting, and what do we want them to think about us as a presenter? We'll talk about how to increase your influence, engaging and persuading your audience to get into action. And then finally, we're going to talk about sticking the landing and making sure we end powerfully in our training sessions. So let's jump in then. So the first area we're going to start with is one of those areas that we all struggle with. I myself have been in front of thousands of people in a crowd before, and yet I still have those doubts, those thoughts that go through our mind, because that's part of being human. And it's not necessarily a natural state to stand up in front of a group full of people and say, hey, everybody, let me teach you something. So we all struggle with those confidence moments, and I'll share some things that may help you in terms of strategies, and I'll also try to give you some pro tips along the way. So what's your challenge when it comes to confidence? If you want to put that in the box, I'd love to know not only what your challenge is, but how you deal with it. Now, help your brothers and sisters too, because they also are challenged by confidence, and maybe you've got a great solution for them. So when you're confident, that message is going to be stronger. The audience is going to be more receptive to listen to it. It's going to build that trust, and it's going to get them into action. Now, you might suspect that as a Chief Learning Officer and as a lifelong trainer, educator, and learner myself, this is my motto in life. I might as well have it tattooed across my chest. Archilochus said, "We do not rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training." Now, I often share that because I truly believe that, and I want folks who come through my training to understand that as well, so that they will adapt whatever it is that we're talking about and go implement it at the highest level possible. As presenters, though, this is true for us as well. We will not rise to the level of our expectations when we present. We will fall to the level of our training. So when we talk about boosting our confidence, it's going to start with where the real work is. And the real work is not done in that training room, virtually or otherwise. The real work of this is done in all the practice and preparation that leads up to your presentation. So you'll see there on the slide, the 8-to-1 rule. What is that? Well, in training, we have a rule of about 8 hours preparation for every 1 hour of delivery. I know that sounds like a lot, right? But think about it. Between getting your materials together, formulating your slides, what you want to say, and then practicing it, and then practicing timing, that really commands a lot of time. And so when you're going to do a presentation, make sure that you're allotting the proper time to practice and get prepared. This is going to help you reduce anxiety. It's going to help you refine your message as well. It'll also help you with delivery so that people hear what you're trying to say. Now, when we prepare, we're going to make notes about what it is that we're going to share. I want to make sure that we go into this with setting ourselves up for success, because the goal of making our speaker notes is not to write out prose, right? We want poetry instead. Really what we want are haikus. Very short bulleted reminders of, oh yeah, this is the point that I wanted to make then. Now, you may write out everything that you want to say, and that's great. That's great practice. But then take the time to edit it down to the bullets that are going to refresh your memory so that you're not there reading off of your notes when you're trying to present. You can't see my notes, but I've got about 3 to 7 points per slide that I'm going to make, and it's all bolded bullet 3-word sentences, just as a reminder of, oh yeah, 8-to-1 ratio. That's what I'm going to say at this point. Now, practice your timing. Believe it or not, this is the area that is the Achilles heel for a lot of trainers and presenters, is not properly pacing themselves so that they hit the material all the way through at the level that they wanted to do it. So a couple of thoughts for you, and a couple of tips. The first is the rule of 3 to 4 minutes, and that is per slide or per page of content, you're going to spend about 3 to 4 minutes. So if you have a 60-minute session and you've got 50 slides, well, that's probably way too many slides, and you're going to have to edit down what you want. You can have interstitial slides like the slide that I just had, number one, boost your confidence. Didn't spend a whole lot of time on that. But when it comes to content slides, 3 to 4 minutes. The other thing too is put your time targets on there so that you know, hey, at this point, I should be about 10 minutes into the presentation. If I'm 7 minutes in, I might want to slow down and ask for questions. If I'm 13 minutes in, I might need to speed up in order to get through the material. So as you go and you prepare, as you practice, make a note. Oh, okay, so I got here at about the 33-minute mark, so that you know how to keep yourself on track. So those are some basic strategies. Let me give you a few pro tips here about getting your confidence up for your training session. And the first is have a great pre-game ritual. So whatever that means for you, if you're an athlete, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You've seen some weird superstitions in the locker room, no doubt. As trainers, though, we have to have a pregame ritual as well. So if you think about it like this, you wake up in a bad mood and go out in the traffic, everybody's going to be against you. You wake up in a great mood and go out in the traffic, it's like, sure, you want to come in my lane, go in my lane, no big deal. Same is going to be true for us when we get up in front of a room and present. Anything that goes wrong, if we're in the wrong frame of mind, it's going to go real wrong. So the key is to get yourself in the right frame of mind, whatever that means for you. If you are a low energy person, I'd recommend having some high energy song, that you amp yourself up with. If you're a high strung individual, maybe meditate to get yourself in the right frame of mind. For me, you see the text on screen. This is my pregame ritual. I'll let you in on a little secret. Long ago, I was going to go present, and I just happened to text my wife to let her know I was not going to be available. I'm going to be presenting. And she sent me back this lovely message that said, good luck, you're going to kill it, you're amazing, blah, 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 right? And along the way, this just became a thing. And to this day, like today, before I get on and start presenting, I send my wife a quick message and she gives me back a lovely, encouraging message that, to me, that's part of my pregame ritual. It puts me in the right frame of mind. Whatever it is for you, here's what you want. You want joy in your heart and energy in your mind and body. Whatever it takes for you to get there, get there. The next is positive visualization. Look, part of the human psychology and part of the human experience is sometimes we catastrophize. We think about the worst things that could possibly happen. What if I fall flat? What if they don't like me? I get it. If you're going to take the time to catastrophize, though, take the time to positively visualize what it's going to be like when you crush it. How many high fives are you going to get at the end of your session? How many people are going to text you or email you 3 months from now telling you, I did exactly what you said and it worked. My business is booming. Take the time to really see yourself crushing that session. And listen, people will tell you, hey, relax. Don't relax. You're not going to relax. Just realize this. You're not nervous. You're excited. And channel your energy into that. It's great to be excited about getting in front of folks and sharing and really helping them build their businesses. Of course, you would want to be excited about that. So don't try to relax. Just channel it properly. Stage fright. So this is something that affects us all. And depending upon your particular version of stage fright, do you have dry mouth? Well, hey, I use these. These are little honey drops. They're hippie halls, basically. Cough drops, but all they are is just honey. Coats my throat. You'll also see me drinking coffee. I switched to decaf in the afternoon because, let's be honest, I'm high energy enough. Whatever it is that your version of stage fright is, make sure that you have coping mechanisms. If you have jittery hands, here's a tip. I usually will have something in my right hand, and I'll put my left hand in my pocket up on stage because I don't want to be flailing around. I want to have controlled gestures. And so I'll pull my left hand out when I need to make gestures, and I'll put it back in so that I'm not distracting the audience. Here's a really good idea for you. I got this a long time ago from a coach who coaches stage performers, bands and celebrities who do large stadium venues. What he would have his clients do is get up on stage before their concert, their show, when nobody was there. And he would have them stand on stage and visualize a bubble around them. And then he'd have them inhale, and as they do, he would have them visualize that bubble getting bigger, enveloping the stage, enveloping the first row, enveloping the 10th row, enveloping the back rows, enveloping the entire building. The exercise does two things for you when you do that. The first is it teaches you what it feels like to fill the room with your presence, which is exactly what we want to do, fill the room with your presence. The other thing is it connects you to the environment. Often we have stage fright because we view getting up there on stage as me and then them. Right? We're separate from the others. There's a spotlight on me. I have to perform for them. This exercise connects you to the room. And one of the things you'll notice that's a cheat for me to connect myself to the audience right off the bat is I ask a question. Remember, I asked at the beginning, what did you want to get out of this? And also asked, what do you think the role of a trainer is? For me, getting that engagement from the audience connects me to it and removes that us versus them kind of thought process. Again, whatever your particular version of confidence issues are, make sure you're coping with those however you need to so that you go up there knowing I've dealt with that, I'm ready. Once you have, let's talk about clearly articulating your message. I had a mentor, Ed Perry. He used to have us get up and present to others, and he would hand us these 3 questions. And the 3 questions were, what did you hear me say? What are you going to do as a result? And how could I improve my message? I'd invite you to incorporate this in your practice. In fact, I'll share with you some tips later on at the end about how to incorporate a couple of those into your actual training sessions so you get that feedback. For clear communication, a few strategies for you. First is define your purpose. So go back to the benefits of this session. If you can't clearly articulate what the benefits of this session will be, what the key takeaways are, they won't be able to clearly articulate it either. I asked you at the beginning, what's the role of a great trainer? There is no right answer to that, so I didn't answer it, but I'll give you my answer to that question. My answer is to give you enough information to get you into action and get you absolutely curious about that topic to want to go learn more. So when you define your purpose around that, that will help you in terms of creating your content. It will help you decide what to keep, what to cut, and will also help you decide what questions do I want my audience walking away from this session with. Now, questions, you don't always have to answer them. In fact, questions can be a great way of invoking that curiosity. Whole part whole is the next strategy here, and you see the mall map there on the screen. Whole part whole is a instructional design technique. As trainers, you might have heard the expression, tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you just told them. When you're presenting on something, say maybe like the listing presentation, do you have 3 steps to a great listing presentation? If so, tell them right up front, here are the 3 steps. Here's them all we're going to walk through together. Now let's talk about step 1. Now that we've talked about step 1, let's transition to step 2. And here's how those fit together. Now let's talk about step 2. And so on and so forth. And then at the end, connect it back together. So again, here are the 3 steps of listings, and we're going to do this, this, and this. That helps that learner to stay engaged, to know what's coming, what's next, and kind of have a sense of where we are on this journey together so they don't get lost along the way. The third point, you see how we've cleverly done what we've done here. Keep your slides concise. Right? So what we use in the instructional design world is the 7x7 rule. No more than 7 bullets per slide, no more than 7 words per bullet. Now that is not a target, that is the maximum. Again, what we don't want are people staring at the screen while we're trying to present and engage them in the conversation. So make sure that your slide content follows that 3 to 4 minute rule. And again, no more than 7x7. And those tips will help you ensure that you keep your message as clear as possible. Another non-intuitive way about keeping your message as clear as possible is by asking great questions. Here's the thing, the wisdom is in the room. I asked at the beginning, what are you challenged by? What are you looking to get out of this session? Those kinds of questions will give me a sense of who all is in the room. Do I have master trainers who are just there for a touch up and to learn a few extra strategies? Do I have complete novices? And when I have those people who are more advanced, I can leverage them in the conversation and they'll bring wisdom that I wouldn't have even thought of in the room. The key is to be able to ask great questions. I went through an MBA in entrepreneurship where I learned how to evaluate companies. I learned how to do high-level financials, cash flow statements, P&Ls, balance sheets, all of that. And yet my professors couldn't make statements in the classroom. They could only ask questions, which goes to show you just how powerful questioning can be when it's done at the highest level. You see the QR code. In the download that code is attached to, we have these Socratic questions for you, along with some of the more detailed questions. And I'll quickly go through those with you. Also in the download is some great questions that are thought-provoking for you as a trainer and as a presenter. So clarifying thinking and understanding, can you give me an example of that? Are you saying this or are you saying that? What problem are you trying to solve? Challenging assumptions. Is that always the case? What are we assuming when we say that? And what would happen if that weren't the case? Examining evidence and rationale. Why do you say that? And what evidence is there that supports that? Considering alternative perspectives. This isn't something we always do. We have a defined point of view on life, and we often don't understand the other side of the argument. So are there any alternatives? What's the other side of that argument? And what makes our viewpoint better than their viewpoint? Number 5, considering implications and consequences. Again, what are the implications of this? How does that affect this? What if we're wrong about that? And finally, the meta question, which is, why do you think I asked that question? What does that question mean? What's the point of that question? Asking a question like, what's the role of a great trainer? There's not necessarily a defined answer to that. But there's a reason why I asked that question, because I would like us all to walk away from that session today thinking, what is the role of a great trainer? And what does that mean for me? So I hope that helps you in your practice, but great questions can invoke great conversation in the room and make your presentation all that much better. Professional presence. Now, when we get up on a stage or in front of a room, We want to project confidence. We want to project authority. We want to project credibility, not because it makes us feel better, but because it helps the audience command their attention. It also commands their respect and makes them much more apt to listen to us if they view us as a professional who knows what we're talking about. And a great question for you to ask yourself as you're doing your 8 hours of prep is, how do I want them to feel about this training at the end? How do I want them to feel about this training? Do I want them to be inspired and curious and want to learn more and want to go put this into action right now? And if so, what does that mean in terms of my delivery? So here's a few strategies for you. The first is commanding the stage, and there's a lot to this. We'll start with our own bodies first. Arms. This can be a big deal, and it can be very distracting if we don't have a great plan. So when you're up on stage presenting, be really purposeful about your gestures. Now, when I'm presenting, I usually will have something in my right hand and will put my left hand in my pocket and pull it out when I need to make hand gestures that are impactful to the conversation. This prevents me from flailing my arms about and over gesticulating throughout the session. Also, too, if you're a nervous person, that can help you, so your hands aren't sitting there shaking or anything like that. If you are a nervous person, I would not put a piece of paper in your hand because that can amplify any shakes that you have. Eye contact. Now, again, this can be a little tricky for those of you who may have a little bit of stage fright. So here's a few tips for you on this. The first is look for your energy givers, not your energy vampires. What I mean by energy vampires are those people who are on their cell phone, or maybe those people who are sitting there with their arms crossed, and whether they are or not, look like they're disagreeing with everything that you're saying because they've got a scowl and they don't look open to it. What I look for are people who are smiling, nodding. I don't necessarily need them to portray that they're agreeing with everything I say. It's okay if I see the RCA tilted head, on somebody's face, because then I know that they're engaged, and that's what I'm looking for. What I typically do is I'll pick out a couple of people like that on this side of the room, a couple of people like that right in front of me, and a couple of people over here, so that I can keep moving across the room in a random fashion and make sure that I'm connecting with people. If you have stage fright, and if making eye contact with people is going to be a nuisance to you and throw you off, here's a trick for you right here. Don't look here, look here. What's interesting is this person will think you're looking at the person behind them. The person behind them will think you're looking at me. And that can be an easy way of not throwing yourself off while you're presenting, but still engaging the audience and still owning the room as you present. Next is utilizing the stage. And you see this wonderful presenter, Jocelyn Tyson. She was the 2023 world champion of public speaking. If you've never gone on YouTube and watched these as a trainer, you will completely geek out at some of the recordings that you'll see of past champions. Now, in Jocelyn's, in particular, she is a master of using the stage. She tells this story of when she first ran a triathlon, which was not her jam, but she was pushing herself. She talks about how she had this inner critic and this inner go-getter. And she used the stage every time she would talk about the go-getter. She would go to this side of the stage or look this direction. And when she would talk about the inner critic, she would look over here, so that she didn't have to keep saying that I'm talking about my inner go-getter over here when I'm saying this, and I'm talking about what the inner critic said when I say this. It was just a quick visual cue. And again, she was using the stage powerfully. So if you're talking about buyers, you can talk about it over here, and talking about listings, you can talk about it over here. But do use the stage, especially if it's a big one. You got to fill the room with that presence. When you practice, here's a good thing to do. Record yourself, and then watch it back in 3 ways. The first is just normal speed, normal volume. Second is muted. And the third is on fast forward. What you're going to see is your body language, how you convey your meaning and your purpose through that. You're going to see if you have nervous tics. Do you keep playing with your hair, or do you keep pulling on your ear, or scratching your nose, or what have you? And those can be great opportunities before you get up on stage to come up with a coping mechanism where you're not going to do that and distract people when you're up on stage. Now, once you do have a great command of the stage, Don't give it away. Never apologize while you're up on stage. I've seen so many presenters get up there and say, "Oh, sorry, I'm sick," or "Man, the IT's not working," or "Oh man, we ran out of time, so I'm not going to get to all the great things I was going to tell you." What you just said to the audience when you do that is, "Hey, you came expecting something great, and I'm going to deliver less than to you." The other thing we often do that for is to let ourselves off the hook. "Oh, sorry, I'm a little under weather today, guys." Don't do that. Don't give your energy away and don't let yourself off the hook. Instead, go crush it. And then afterwards, when you're talking with your training buddies, then you can tell the story of how you were under the weather, the IT didn't work, and you didn't have everything you needed, and yet I still crushed it, right? Finally, dress and presentation style. So for your final prep, one of the biggest things I'm going to talk to you about is making sure that you come mentally prepared, right? This is one of the biggest things. And that doesn't happen the morning of, that happens the day before. We're going to get plenty of sleep, plenty of water so that we wake up feeling our best that we possibly can, right? Then, of course, when we get dressed, here's a tip. This is the kind of gauge that I use. I want to dress just a little bit above where I think my audience is going to be, whatever that means for you and your audience. By the way, extra points if it's eXp Blue. And then for your final preparations, again, I said, don't try to memorize everything. Just memorize the first 30 seconds that are going to come out of your mouth. And then realize that your practice is going to guide you through the rest. Hope that helps you. And if it helps even more, here's a great pro tip for you, which is leading the room. So first off, at the start, I want you to get there early. I always try to get to my rooms at about an hour beforehand. I want to check the technology. I want to make sure everything's set up. If I was expecting flip chart paper, is it there? Do I have markers? Do I have what I need in the room? And am I ready? The other reason I want to show up early is because I want to greet people as they come in. I want to get to know them. I want to shake their hands. I want to interact with them because I want an interactive session. I'll even reference back to, "Hey, Jocelyn, before we started today, you mentioned this. You want to share a little bit about that with the crowd?" So that I can engage people. The other thing too is I'm going to set rules of engagement. I want people to know that, hey, we're going to turn off our cell phones. And if the phone goes off, how much do you guys want to pay to extend a hand? Okay, well, what if they answer it? How much are we going to pay to extend a hand? I also want to make sure that they know to limit side conversations, to be kind to one another, to give everybody the benefit of the doubt in the conversation. And if we're going long, I want them to know the timing of the session, when we're going to do breaks and things like that. Now, during the class, here's a great thing is we're going to use a parking lot. Normally, when I start a class, I'm going to ask that question, "Hey, what did you come here to learn today?" And I'm going to write that down on a flip chart piece of paper so that that's up there. That's my opportunity to say, "Yep, we're going to cover that. Yep, we're going to cover that. Yep, we're going to cover that. Ooh, this we're not going to cover today, but I tell you what, come find me after break or email me or what have you, and I'll help you with that." That way we can properly set expectations. Now, if somebody throws a curveball or wants to jump ahead, the parking lot is a great area to go, "Oh, you know what, we're going to hit that in a little bit, but let me write this down here and you hold me honest. When we get there, if I don't fully answer your question, re-ask it again, okay?" All right, great. And that's the way we use the parking lot. Bad apples. So I don't want to dwell on the negatives, but if you do this for long enough, you will have somebody who's having a bad day, or for whatever reason, they're overly aggressive or overly negative when they raise their hand and try to make a point. So a few thoughts for you. The first is, don't give in to the urge to put them in their place. I understand, I'm high D as well. And I know sometimes when somebody does something that's overly aggressive, maybe a little mean, that can be an urge or a first blush at addressing it. I would urge you not to. Then you are immediately the bad guy. You've just used your position as the head of the room to hurt this person. And no matter what they said, you're going to be viewed far worse. You will have lost the audience. So instead, I'll take two different approaches depending upon how it comes across and what they're saying. One approach might be to simply say, "Okay, I think I understand you. What I'm hearing, though, is really a difference of opinion, not necessarily a right or wrong answer. You're saying you don't do it this way because of you, your market, your price point, what have you. For me, my market, my price point, who I am, this is the way I do it. Now, another way to deal with this is to enlist the folks in the room. Hey, I hear what you're saying. Is that what everybody else feels as well? And let the room argue that person down if it needs to be argued down. I hope that helps you, and hopefully you won't have many hecklers in your lifetime. And if you do, it'll be minor. But those are two easy ways to address those types of things. All right, number 4, increasing our influence. So our influence in a room is going to help us motivate, persuade, and inspire people to take action. All right, and hopefully this is going to be what pushes people to lead to the desired outcome for them. And without influence, you can give a great presentation, but it's not going to hit the same way. So let's talk about increasing your influence. The first is to establish credibility early. So I was very purposeful in giving you my history, my bona fides, as they call them, at the very beginning, because I want you to know that, hey, I'm somebody who's been there right along with you. I've gotten dry mouth. I've had trouble with folks in the classroom before. I've been there, and I can show you what successes look like for me, and hopefully you can model that in your own practice. So be sure to share not only your successes, but also your failures and how you dealt with those types of things. It'll earn their trust and their admiration. The other thing is tell intentional and compelling stories. So this is a tricky one here, because oftentimes, and I'm sure if you've been in real estate for a long time, you've probably been to training that was nothing more than that person's war stories. And it just so happens that they were the superstar of every story that they told. So when it comes to choosing stories, understand stories can be really a powerful way of getting a lesson across. That's why most of the world's major religions are told in parables. That's how we learn. That's why TV and books are so popular. It's how we learn. The key is to make it directly relevant, and also to be really choosy about which stories we include and which ones we don't. And one thing that can help you make that decision is, am I telling this story just because it makes me look good? Or am I telling this story because the audience will really understand my message once they understand this story? And then use data and evidence as you need to back up your stories as well. So less is more, especially when it comes to speaking and telling stories. Understand there is a big, powerful reason why you would want to use silence at times. It can help the audience to have time to process something profound. And especially if you choose your words carefully, they may need that time to process. You see on screen the statue of David. Now, when it comes to telling you the story of David, I could tell you a really long story of the manufacturing of this statue. I could tell you how Michelangelo beat out Leonardo da Vinci for the commission for this. But that's not relevant to what we're talking about. And you can see how I've crossed through several of the quotes here again, because I'm so clever, right? But here's a story about David that is relevant. The guild that commissioned Michelangelo to build the statue of David had already picked out a huge block of marble. In fact, they called it Il Gigante, right? The gigantic. And Michelangelo took the time to chisel away to unveil David. It took him 3 years. So when you're practicing your preparation, chip away at your stories, chip away at your slides, chip away at your message, and distill it down to what it needs to be powerful. Next pro tip on this about increasing your influence is engage them. I ask for knowledge levels in the room. You know, how many of you have built a website before? How many of you have ever called an expired before? Because I want to know who's in that room. Again, the wisdom is in the room, and that allows me to engage them and ask people at key points to chime in, to offer their own opinion. So when we do that, we're really going to understand our audience a lot better, and it will allow us to speed up or slow down as we know they need in order to convey our message powerfully to them. I'm also going to engage. I like interaction regularly throughout the training program. So if I'm doing virtually, I'll push them into the chat, or I'll ask a poll that will come up on screen. If I'm doing it and in person, I'm going to use a flip chart, or ask questions, or start a discussion, or things of that nature. I like exercises in rooms as well, getting people to engage with their neighbor. Hey, quickly turn to your neighbor and ask them this question, or try this script on them. What was that like for you? And finally, show empathy and relatability. You see the quote from Oscar Wilde: the only difference between saints and sinners is that every saint has a past while every sinner has a future. Me personally, you may be a saint at your topic, so to speak, metaphorically, but I don't care until I know that you are also a sinner, right? I don't want people who are, know-it-alls and somebody who came out of the delivery room as an expert on the topic. I want to know where they failed. I want to know where they succeeded. I want to know how they got from failure to success. Empathy builds trust, and it helps you form that deeper emotional connection with your audience as well. All right, finally, stick the landing. So you've done all this preparation, you've done an amazing job of presenting it. Now let's nail the close. We want to create a closing to our presentation that inspires, that creates gratitude, that creates community in the room as well. Most important, that gets them into action. Here's what Lily Walters says. She says, the success of your presentation will be judged not by the knowledge you send, but by what the listener receives. Remember Ed Perry's 3 questions. What did you hear me say? What are you going to do as a result? And how could I have conveyed that information better? So when we talk about the strategies around sticking the landing, here's a few thoughts for you. First is summarize key points clearly. So again, going back to this whole part whole, and again, there's that QR code if you want that download. Going back to this whole part whole, we're going to go back through the benefits of this session together. And I'm going to talk to you about these 5 points. Now, here's a pro tip for you on this topic. Instead of me summarizing it, what I prefer to do is get them to summarize it. Again, what did you hear me say? So I'm going to ask people like, okay, so we just went through these 5 steps. What were your big takeaways on these? And let them share with me what they took away. And I'm going to ask them each time, hey, what are you going to do about that? So that was your takeaway. Okay, how do you put that into action in your practice? Because I also want the audience to have the benefit of their wisdom about how they're going to translate this into action, so that maybe they can steal that idea for themselves. If we are going along and I get 4 people who hit the 4 points, but not the 5th point, I might just say, hey, anybody have a great takeaway on professional presence? What did you take away from that you never wanted to forget? Oh, that's great. Okay, so what are you going to do as a result of that? Again, I want to hit all the points that I want them to walk away with, but I don't necessarily need to do it. The wisdom is in the room. Going back, I want to get them into action, and I want to save time at the end for Q&A and thank yous. Now, because of the format of this, I'm not able to do that, but ordinarily in a normal session, virtually or in the room, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I want to make sure that I have time at the end. Now, look, if it's a 60-minute session, nobody's going to be mad if you let them out at 49 minutes. They'll be happy as long as you give them the time to get their questions answered. So before I close a session, I like to have a closer, something that really ties everything together, something that inspires, that's relevant, that's powerful. Now, I'm going to share with you a closer that I used in the past. In fact, I'm probably going to have to retire it after this, just as an example of what a closer looks like. And hey, if you like this one, great, you steal it. And if you want to use this to develop your own, great. So here's the closer I've used in the past. I asked the question, does anybody know who Roger Bannister is? Usually in most rooms, there's at least a few people who know who he is. In May of 1954, Roger Bannister, a British man, set the new world record for the mile. He finally broke the 4-minute mile. Now, people have been trying to do this for a millennium. And in 1954, Roger Bannister did in May. I then asked the question, does anybody know who John Landy was? Occasionally people do. And 46 days after Roger Bannister set that record, John Landy beat his. By the way, if you care, Roger Bannister set the record with 3 minutes, 59 seconds and some change. Roger Bannister beat him with 3 minutes, 57 seconds and some change. And one of the first takeaways I share with the audience, one of the first takeaways I have about this is every second counts if you make it count. The other takeaway I have about this story in the beginning is that it's interesting, isn't it? How once somebody shows you what's possible, it's not too long before people follow suit and it becomes commonplace. Today, there are high school kids who break the 4-minute mile. So when we talk about people like Jocelyn or some of the other world public speaking champions, it's not going to be too much longer until you're able to best what they've done to be such great presenters. Then I tell them the other part of the story, which is part of the story most people don't know. Roger Bannister, when he set that record in May, was planning to retire. He had done what people had been trying forever to do. And so he was going to walk away on top. And then Landy beat him 46 days later. In August of that same year, that very same summer, the Brits were having what they called the Commonwealth Games, their version of the Olympics. All sorts of events at the Commonwealth Game, but the Miracle Mile, that's what people called it, the Miracle Mile was what everybody was there to see. It was John Landy and Roger Bannister going head to head. Now, there were some other runners in the race. I defy you to tell me who those people were. Nobody remembers them. Because right from the get-go, these two took off and commanded the lead. And they were neck and neck until near the end of the race, Landy pulled ahead. Now, as they entered the final leg of the race, Landy was curious where Roger Bannister was. And so at the near end, he looks over his left shoulder to see where Bannister was. Now, unfortunately, Bannister was passing Landy on his right shoulder to win the race. Now, a couple interesting points about that. The first is, I share, your goals are in front of you, not behind you. Listen, we've all had bad presentations. We've hopefully learned from those. That's all in the past. Focus on what's ahead of you and go after it. Because if somebody catches you looking at the wrong time, they're going to build a larger-than-life bronze statue in Vancouver, British Columbia, commemorating your loss. That's a very true story, by the way. That statue is outside the P&E in Vancouver. The bigger takeaway, though, is this. What most people didn't realize is that day, Roger Bannister set a personal best record. He beat his own record, and he also beat John Landy. And here's the thing. Who you run with matters. The right people will push you further and faster than you ever thought possible. So from all of us here at eXp, thank you for running with us. And thank you for running with one another too, and helping our eXp agents be better as the fantastic trainers that you are. I hope this has helped. Please reach out if I can help you further. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.